So we're transitioning from that traditional way of teaching and learning that most of us experienced to what we're calling proficiency-based learning. And it really is a deeper way of looking at learning. So we're really focusing on what do we need to do differently so that our kids are creative problem solvers, they're self-directed, that they are incredibly strong communicators, that they can innovate and reinvent themselves many times because they will in their career. Those days of having the same career for years are gone.
Proficiency-based learning. It's a term and a bit of educational jargon parents of school children and those who follow educational trends will be hearing more about in coming months. By 2020, schools will be required to have proficiency-based graduation standards in place. That means students will have to demonstrate they have mastered or have met certain basic standards before they graduate. Most people, thinking back to their own days in school, recall getting letter or number grades which presumably told whether or not you understood a particular subject at a particular grade level well enough to move on to the next grade. But concerns have risen in recent decades that these letter grades or numbers didn't really tell colleges or prospective employers or the students themselves if a student really did get the nuances of English literature, algebra, history, chemistry, or whatever at a passing level. With proficiency-based learning, each student will have an individual learning plan, which means they could accelerate what kinds of courses they are taking or take more time in certain classes to demonstrate genuine mastery before they go on to the next level. Skylar LeBombard, currently the principal at Sunderland Elementary School and who has been named as the Bennington-Rutland Supervisory Union's curriculum director, explains.
Proficiency-based learning is a system of best practices that will allow us to measure what students know and what they can do. It varies from traditional models of educational practice in that it's not necessarily quantified on how well they can do things. One challenge that traditionally based grading specifically poses for students is it doesn't allow for a growth mindset, in a sense that some students feel that they're not good in math, and their grades on a traditional scale might reflect that. And it can, things like missing homework assignments can be punitive to that grade, when in reality it doesn't necessarily reflect their proficiency in that specific skill. So what proficiency-based learning does is it gives us specific skills that kids can build self-awareness about, and it allows for more targeted interventions. And ideally, the system that we're going to be hopefully going live with in 2019-2020 school year will also inform parents. So it'll be reported out on those specific skills so that students have self-awareness, parents have a better idea of exactly the skills that their student is working on, and that'll allow us to better relationships with the community, provide parents with ways to help their child learn those specific skills and become proficient.
Mm-hmm. One of the concerns so far is around how schools will implement new grading scales, which will be on a range of 1 to 4. Each school district has been handed the task of how to measure whether students have achieved a proficient understanding of a given subject.
It's a different way. Traditional educational model that's been around since the mid-1800s has been grade levels. So that's kind of a mental construct that teachers will have to start to get away from. It's going to be a challenge because every adult out there has experienced, for the most part, has experienced that traditional model. So it's something new that people will have to get used to, but it will allow us to meet kids where they are. It's no surprise to anyone to learn that in a classroom at a specific grade level, there are learners of a continuum of ability levels. And traditionally, how we've addressed that is we've had this content that we cover in, say, first grade. Whether or not a student understands that content and masters that content in the traditional model is somewhat irrelevant. And then these gaps start to appear and grow over time. What proficiency-based learning, proficiency-based reporting does, lets us meet kids where they are, understand exactly the skills that they need. It'll allow for flexible grouping, things, which is a practice that's currently in place. So teachers will not necessarily have to learn a foundational shift. It's kind of more challenging those constructs that we have for teachers, none of whom are used to doing things this way.
Proficiency-based learning has its origins back in the 1970s and was formally adopted as an approach for Vermont educators in 2014. Schools must also be prepared to monitor and record satisfactory progression and graduation requirements that are met through learning experiences outside the traditional classroom. William Basic, the superintendent of the Battenkill Valley Supervisory Union, explains how the Arlington School District hopes to implement this.
Yeah, as I say, it's something that many towns in Vermont and across nations have already implemented at elementary and middle schools, and obviously it's a little bit easier there because you're hitting standards instead of actual grades. But our high schools across America and certainly in Vermont are very traditional, and we like to grade our children on A, B, C's, and D's. So proficiency-based learning can and may change all that as we try to reach standards and learning qualities instead of actual grades. Here in Arlington, we're developing a system right now to roll out where we'll do both at the same time. We'll help keep our traditional grading system, and children will be graded on that, as long as a separate system as well that they'll align to the proficiency base that the teachers are developing at this point. The exciting part of that is, as you know, that Arlington is embarking on a large flexible pathways through Act 77, as proficiency-based learning is part of Act 77 as well. But this will really give us the flexibility to get out into the community and grade the children appropriately in the community. So for instance, we have a great resource here in Arlington, Mac Molding, and we for years wanted to get our children into the factory and not only learn the skills that the workers are learning there, but become educated and reach our standards that our children here have at the high school. So this will allow children who go into Mac Molding, and we can work with the people at Mac and say these are the standards that a 10th grade student is learning in math. And somehow you will have to have that same type of learning occurring as well. So that'll be something really exciting for us to do. We're still obviously a year or two away from that, but that's our ultimate goal, is to be able to have a traditional education for those who want it, and we offer that very well here in Arlington. But for those who are also looking for something different and following those the state Act 77, we're going to be well ahead of the curve and positioned to do that with integrity.
For the GNAT-TV News Project, I'm Andrew McKeever.